Josh Gondelman, an Emmy-winning writer who is a writer and co-executive producer on Showtime's hit late-night show, Desus and Mero, a nominee once again at the WGA Awards in the Comedy Variety Talk Series category, where the show won in 2021. Josh, I guess let's start there. 2021, great start for you guys, winning the award, but a strange year, I guess, from a comedy perspective, maybe not as downtrodden as 2020, but still it's still difficult and challenging. And I guess, from a comedy standpoint and a writing standpoint, how do you what were the big challenges of trying to find funny in what was maybe not a all-time funny year?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So much to dig into there. And first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. I almost said no. I only do panels where I look like the moderator if he were wearing a disguise. So thank you for having me. This fits the bill perfectly. It's been a really tough period of time for, reasons that might be obscure to viewers and listeners. But 2020 was moving to a fully remote setup and then moving back into the studio in 2021. It's been a lot of transition in terms of both just like how the show physically gets made, right? How we make Desus and Mero, how we shoot it, where we shoot it. At the first several weeks of the pandemic, I remember thinking like, oh, nothing in the world is funny. And then Gal Gadot released the Imagine video, and I was like, humor is back. And so it was after that, like once culture kind of started to return, there was a little more to pick on. I mean, the New York City mayoral race happened. We were able to get Desus and Mero, who were shooting remotely from two different US states, right? Mero lives in New Jersey, Desus lives in New York City. And so they were shooting in two different states. We were able to bring them together a little bit as 2020 was winding down and 2021 was starting. So it was actually, by the time we were headed towards 2021, it was easier to both find things to poke fun at and then easier to produce comedy based on those premises.
That's great. One of the things, obviously, I think is so great about the show, and I think that people like, is their relationship. They're obviously friends, and you can't really, I guess, how do you guys do that? You can't really write friendship, but they obviously are friends. So how do you guys balance? I just think it's when I used to listen to a lot of talk radio, and it's like a Howard Stern, the hardest thing is making something sound natural, right? But I mean, obviously they are natural. So how do you guys do that and work on that with the writing from that perspective?
So a lot of the writing is kind of highly focused and at times pretty minimalist in terms of just giving them the prompts and giving the audience the context they need to understand the kind of riffing and spontaneity. And so there are things that are written down word for word, in terms of individual lines and jokes and things that are written on the page in terms of structure and context and content. But it isn't the stuff that they do in the studio where they're riffing on the news. We write a little bit of context and then they're so extemporaneous, which is, I think it would be irresponsible of me to not consider that the writing of the show as well, because that is where so much of the comedy comes from. And we know that it comes from there. So it is really it's been a really exciting and wonderful learning process over the past few years to figure out how to write for people who are just waiting to riff and how they can get used to having people writing for them. And it's been a really wonderful period of growing together, and they're so amazing. And our writing staff is really wonderful, and everyone knows each other really well at this point. So it's it is really knowing when to have that light touch of okay, they're going to want to riff on this for a while, and knowing when okay, we need to punch, we need to provide some extra structure, some extra comedy here, so that to enhance what they're going to do naturally, and to invite the audience in a little more than because I think it could very easily, without that structure, just sound like a conversation between two friends that is maybe not a TV show. Not all friendship is a TV show, but theirs, fortunately, it translates very naturally to the screen.
For sure. Was there a moment you get even I mean, not this year probably because it's the third season, but I mean, was there a moment where you kind of clicked for you guys as the writers know when you could when you could tee them up with a prompt or something, or when that clicked into place?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's it's so fun because I've gotten to be on set for a couple things too. I've got to be in a couple sketches, and just like being on that side and like playing off of them, you're like, oh, this is the kind of stuff they want. Is they want these like prompts and like jokes to push against. And so that was a really helpful experience, like feeling the way that they work firsthand, like being on set. I'm trying to think of like a sketch, because there are also things that are more written, like season 1, Ziwei, who is the you know, the host and star of the show Ziwei, by Ziwei, who I love, worked on our show and wrote this wonderful parody of the film Green Book that was like very structured and very written. And then we've gone on to other things that are like very improvisational. And so I think like everything we do, we're kind of refining the process still, because it's not like, it's not coming from just like one person's brain and then it is being brilliantly acted and then ending up on the screen. It's like everybody kind of touches it at once, from like the writers to the to Desus and Mero and the other performers, and then like the editors are so, I think like I really want to shout them, I know I really want to shout them out, because so much of it looking natural, right? It's not just putting a camera on things that are naturally happening. It's like editing out what doesn't feel like the top shelf material and then refining it down. So even when there are gaps, making it feel very natural. So I like can't think of oh, you know what? It was after the first episode. It was the first episode I was so proud of, and it had that Green Book sketch in it that was really wonderful. But the studio stuff we did probably 6 or 7 segments, and they were clipped really tightly and ended on these big laughs. You know, comedy. And I think Mero really felt like, oh, you know what? We want to kind of let these breathe a little more. Like we don't have to cut it just to the joke. We want it to feel more conversational. And so like writing with that in mind, like that they want there to be like ebbs and flows to the energy, and they want the audience to feel them finding it a little bit, instead of just being like, we're playing the hits, you know? It's we're the Eagles. We're back on tour because we need the money. I think that was like such a moment of Mero just being like, oh, just like let it breathe a little more than another late night show would necessarily. And that felt really good. And I think like that is a very signature feeling of the show, and like something that we all know to kind of aspire towards, to like let them push through it a little bit and then figure out like how much to tighten afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. You mentioned something there in there that I was thinking of too. You obviously, you're an Emmy winner for Last Week Tonight, was a weekly show. Mm-hmm. This is a twice weekly show. I think, you know, I guess like, can you talk about the challenges of that? Because I think like, I kind of would equate it to like a baseball season is very long, 162 games, right? So even the best team is going to lose like 62 times.
Yeah.
And, you know, like a daily late night show, all of these shows, I like all of these shows. I'm not like trying to besmirch them, but I'm like, they have like a lot of more room for failure or whatever, right? And you're doing twice a week. You guys don't necessarily have that room. So I guess, can you talk about like the challenges of that, and like how you think about that in the writer's room, where it's like, oh, maybe this isn't like does every joke have to be like, or everything you're thinking like have to be like a B+ or an A, rather than like, well, it's like a B-, we'll be fine because we will do another one tomorrow. Like, how do you guys think of that?
I mean, I think that we really try to hold ourselves to a high standard of making it real fun and funny for the audience to watch. I think like we're not trying to put filler on the air, not that the other shows do, but I think it is also what it is the what is limited by the production schedule, and we're kind of in that middle ground, right, between a weekly where they kind of want to make every show like the event of the week, and a nightly where it's like consistency and stability, and then like figuring out how to build on top of that, you know, build out big things within that like really rigorous structure, you know? And I think a show like ours, which is twice weekly and has like a pretty slight staff by comparison to some of the shows, it's really finding out that balance of like, when can we carve the time out of the week to do something ambitious? When do we have the time to send Desus and Mero to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to hang out with Yo-Yo Ma and ask him to play the beat to Rough Riders Anthem by DMX, you know? And it's like figuring out that, like, how to infuse the show with that kind of ambition on kind of like a pretty breakneck schedule, given our personnel, and that they star in most of the things, you know, that it's Desus and Mero. It's not like Desus and Mero and friends. So that is, I mean, there are friends, but yeah, I think that is like really the twice a week challenge, because we don't quite have the week to ramp up like the other shows, like the weekly shows do, but we also don't have that like expectation of like you come on and you kill it with jokes every night, and then when there's something special, it's a treat. We like kind of have to strike that balance.
Yeah. It's a great show. And obviously, I'm a big fan. Josh Gondelman, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for
Desus and
having
Mero
me.
on Showtime. Thank you.
A real pleasure.